This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Lauren Lester, the voice of Robin and Nightwing.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review.
Hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com.
And on your favorite podcast app.
Gotham City is out of control.
An entire city screaming in fear.
Supervillains walk the streets, preying on the innocent.
They will learn the true nature of power.
The police are powerless. A creature prowls this urban wasteland. Who's that? He moves in darkness. For some, he is a rumor, a name whispered in the corridors of the underworld, waiting for the chance to strike. Let every criminal know the acid taste of fear.
You crazy! Bat! Giant bat!
Gotham has forgotten what justice means. The Dark Knight is here to remind them. Who are you? Batman. Good guys wear black.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 201 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account, it's Liam. Liam, welcome to episode 201 of the DCAU Review. Finally covered that, crossed that 200 mark there.
That's right. We are now on the other side of that, so we've got a while to go for our next milestone, but not a while to go until our next milestone episode to review, because the hits really just keep on coming as we continue to cover Batman the Animated Series all month long. And we are doing it with another all-time classic, that being His Silicon Soul. But Cal, we are not doing it alone, as we have a very special guest correspondent with us this week.
That's right. Absolutely. You probably know his artwork from Batman The Adventures Continue. If you've listened to our bonus episodes or bonus coverage, just started out, we saw some amazing covers of his. And then if you're not following him on Twitter, he does everything Star Wars, Spider-Man, the animated series. Clearly a deep love for the DCAU here, but we have amazing artist Jordan Gibson joining us here as our special correspondent. Jordan, welcome to the DCAU Review.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Jordan, we're honored to have you on here. We've been fans since we didn't know anything about you until we see these amazing covers that you actually the initial cover that you did for Batman The Adventures Continue season 2. And then so we're like, all right, looking at your Instagram, and then you kind of released these additional covers that you did that didn't get selected. And it's like, hold on, this guy clearly has a love and an understanding of the Batman the Animated Series lore here. And it just kind of took off from there. And we know you got the opportunity to actually do the artwork for an entire issue for Batman The Adventures Continue season 2. We dubbed you pairing with Monica, the world's finest, you and best friend of the show, Monica Kubina.
I love that.
So we're really in awe of your artwork and honored to have you on the program here. So thanks for joining us. We're excited to review this episode with you, His Silicon Soul. Before we get into that, and before we get into the episode itself, this episode originally aired on the Fox Kids network here in America on the 20th of November, 1992, which means we're coming up in just a few short months on the 30th anniversary of this episode. And
oh, wow.
Crazy. We're going to get some information, a little bit about Jordan's background here in just a second. But before we do that, let's intro the episode itself with the official IMDb synopsis. Jordan, this is we go to the Internet Movie Database, we pull the crowdsourced description of this episode, and then we critique it. So
I've heard a couple. I heard I was listening to your Birds of a Feather one.
Awesome. Yep, that's there are mixed results when it comes to synopsis. So we're crossing our fingers for an entertaining one today.
Okay.
Sure. So this is the synopsis for the episode His Silicon Soul, which was written by Marty Eisenberg and Robert Skur, directed by Boyd Kirkland, with music by Harvey R. Cohen and Carl Johnson, and animation by both Dong Yang and Spectrum. And that synopsis reads as such. HARDAC's robot replica of Bruce Wayne wanders around, believing himself to be the real Batman. Full stop.
Wait, that's it?
That's all we get. It's wandering around.
wandering around out there. I mean, A for humor,
Yes.
and like a D- for content there.
Yes.
All right.
Right.
Before we get into the episode, Jordan, let's talk a little bit about your background here. So, a couple questions for you. As I mentioned, you clearly have an amazing understanding and love for this DCAU universe, and certainly Batman the Animated Series. So, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your first memories or exposure to Batman the Animated Series, and just kind of what inspired you to kind of continue that love here years after it debuted.
Yeah, no, man, like for me, this was the thing, because I was born in '89, so
Good year for Batman.
yeah, right, yeah. So I was like even a little young for it, I guess, but it's just been a thing that has always been there.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I was like, I must have been like 1 or 2, there was like Adam West reruns. My dad noticed that I loved those, and then he just started taping the animated series for me. And so it's basically like, it's just always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically was raised completely on that, because there was nothing else like it on TV. And then it just, I don't know, I was like kind of a snob too with Batman, because like that was so good and I could tell it was good. And then I would see like a regular Batman comic and I'd be like, this isn't the same.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. When did you, like, obviously your art style, if people aren't familiar with it, just Google Jordan Gibson Batman the Animated Series, or go get that issue in Batman the Adventures Continue. Your art style is incredibly similar and like fits right in to that Bruce Timm style, that that Ty Templeton style. Like when did you start really beginning to emulate that? And are there other sources that really, are you self-taught? Did you go to school for this? Like, how did that come to be?
So I basically was always drawing. I would just sit down and watch those episodes and sketch the whole time.
Wow.
Or watching Toonami or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what I had been dealing with for the past, I don't know, for the, high school art and up, was people being like, you can't just draw like Bruce Timm. Try to find your own style. And I was like, yes, okay. And that has kind of been what I had been working against for the longest time. And I definitely do think I have my own thing going on, but
for sure,
when it comes to Batman, it is impossible almost for me to not go there with that.
Mm-hmm.
So for to get this, I was kind of like, I could just go for it finally, and I was allowed to just try as much as I could. Because so much, I would say, like growing up, like the first couple of, because I was also a big Marvel guy,
mm-hmm.
plus Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love all DC stuff, but that kind of came a little later.
Mm-hmm.
But so basically my whole thing was all the 60s Marvel stuff. And so it was like John Romita and Jack Kirby and guys like that, because Bruce Timm and Darwin Cook and guys like that kept clearly pulling from them.
Yep.
And that's kind of like I realized later that was also the stuff that they liked too. So I don't know, it was kind of pulling from all those things. And then I just started to try to study as many different artists as I could. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them I would study were also people that Bruce Timm liked, just to be like, how can I see where he gets what and whatever. But yeah, that's basically, it was just nice to finally just get to go for it.
Well, you knocked it out of the park. It was my favorite issue.
Thanks.
In season 2.
Thank you.
We have a love,
Thank
obviously, for Mr. Templeton and his work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Legendary artist in those tie-in comics. But if he's not able to get back into this for his health reasons,
right.
Man, we're pulling. And even if he is, we're pulling for something for you to be able to do.
I would love. I'm always down for more. Yeah.
You hear that? If DC's listening, you hear that, guys? Hire Jordan to do anything, please. We will buy every copy. But yeah, it's definitely, it fits in that world. But you're absolutely right. You have your own. It's uniquely yours, your style, and pulling in all of those very legendary artists makes a whole lot of sense of why your style is the way that it is. That's awesome.
Thanks. Absolutely.
And kind of, we just touched on it for a second there, but speaking of which, a little while ago on your social medias, you had shared sort of a character design for a Tim Drake Robin, sort of in the new Batman Adventure style, but also sort of him imagined as a Justice Lord, which kind of got my wheels turning. And I wondered, is there another DCAU show, tie-in comic, or like a show itself that you could envision yourself working on? And would it be a Justice League or a Superman or something like that?
I think the other one I would really like to do if we're going shows, I do love Superman, but I would really like to do Batman Beyond.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
I think that would be, because I know that they do some Beyond comics, but I would like to do one that's specifically a DCAU continuation, because they're kind of doing their own thing with those, I think.
Yeah, they're kind of their own universe.
Yeah. But either that, if we're also just, it would just be cool to do like a Nightwing things or something like that. I want to just take somebody like that and just let them do their own adventure. That'd be cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Speaking of own adventures, I will also, I don't know how I didn't bring this up before, but we also talked about on one of our bonus episodes, but your little story in 'Tis the Season to Be Freezing with the Mr. Freeze and Robin story, that may be my favorite comic story in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years.
Oh man, thank you.
Everything about that, and every little homage that you put in there to both the original Batman Adventures comic, which was I must have read that original holiday special, I don't know, 5,000 times when I was younger.
Same.
The homages that you put into that, and the additional homages to the animated series appearances from Mr. Freeze, like, man, it was such a joy to read that. And Liam and I just spent like hours back and forth talking about how amazing it was. It was just so great.
And we'd probably be remiss not to mention you also did like little title cards like they were an episode of the story. That
was so fun. I was like, how to do it.
Yes. And it just fit. You hear that Mr. Freeze theme kick in on the title card for that story, and it's like, oh my god, like you have to list, it makes you want to put on the soundtrack while you read the comic so that you can really fit into that world.
All right, so we've established Jordan is one of us. He's a fan of the DCAU.
Established his bona fides, as it was.
So we appreciate you being here. Jordan, as a special correspondent, is going to give his own scores for this week's episode, as we talked about his Silicon Soul. So we might as well jump into the plot here, Liam. We'll do a quick recap of this. So if you remember, actually way back on our episode 92, we covered the original HARDAC episode, Heart of Steel, parts 1 and 2. You can check out that in the archives at DCAUreview.com or on your favorite podcast app if you wish. But that was a legendary episode. We had this giant supercomputer that was creating replicants of all of these different people in Batman's life. And it's Batman meets Terminator meets maybe a little Blade Runner. Like, it's very, the whole idea of, robots replacing humans and making humans obsolete, and the evil AI sort of being the puppet master here. And it's fun to get like the sequel to this. It's like Friday the 13th part 2, like where the monster, is coming back. Yeah, and that's kind of what we get here. And we open up the episode with these to me, I think the first 2 scenes were a very horror movie inspired setting here. We have this very dark, dingy warehouse that these guys are walking through, and they're talking about this technology that's there, and they come upon this crate that has this mysterious logo on it. Just, that something bad's going to happen as soon as there's a mysterious logo on a box. What could go wrong?
This is a bunch of junk, Chaz. What'd you drag us down here for?
I'm telling you, man, this place is full of top secret technology from some computer factory that blew up.
It's full of something, all right. And so are you.
No, I'm serious, man. Defense systems, robotics, laser weaponry. hand here. Man, this ain't happening.
Pathetic.
They're of course looking for remnants of what they say was the supercomputer that that exploded, and they're trying to rob this warehouse. And wouldn't you know, as they go to break open this box, the Dark Knight appears in this crate, and just an epic entrance, Jordan. Like you find out this isn't the real Batman, but what a typical Batman entrance.
It's great.
Busting out of a crate, right?
It almost does. It's funny, Jordan, you mentioned the Adam West series. It's almost something you could imagine happening in that show. More like a comedic way of doing it. So the fact that they managed to play it pretty serious here is kind of impressive, where he just bursts out of a box on the ground.
Totally.
But yes, we find out very quickly as the thugs open fire on this Batman that it is not, in fact, the Dark Knight we know, but is in fact one of, as we come to find out when he meets Alfred in the next scene, he is one of Carl Rossum's robot duplicates. And that Alfred tries his best. I do have to wonder, and Jordan, you may have thought of this too, Alfred's plan to stop the robot was try to use knockout gas, and he already knows it's a robot by this point. So I mean, it's panic. I get it, like you're panicking, but there's a lot of weapons in the Batcave, as we see later. Shows knockout gas.
I was thinking about that. I was like, well, he's kind of an old British guy. He may not really get, if we're setting this in like in any time, it's like the 50s. Maybe he doesn't really understand how robots work yet.
Robots don't breathe, Alfred.
Right. He like he said, like I was thinking, I watched the Grey Ghost episode recently, and I love there's like a part where he's like, I don't watch television. I prefer my fireplace. And it's like, this guy doesn't know how a robot works.
I mean, and he clearly he thought there was somebody breaking and entering into Wayne Manor, and he comes in with a golf club. Like out of all of the things that he could have grabbed, he grabs the golf club.
Yeah.
Bold moves there by Alfred, who's clearly not ready
it's a little out of his depth.
Yeah,
exactly. I know, man. You'd think, there might be, I don't know, a shotgun or something.
I guess in all his British super spy days that we find about later in the series, he never encountered any androids.
I forgot.
Yeah. Well, after this, so we cut at this point back to the warehouse where Commissioner Gordon is speaking with Batman, and it appears that Batman has captured this group of men or at least Commissioner Gordon is under the impression that Batman had sort of subdued this group of men, and Batman quickly realizes and tells Commissioner Gordon that it's not him, and latched onto one of the guy's like lapels. This piece of technology. I didn't see how that got there. Did you guys see how that?
No, I didn't know. I was thinking that too.
I was like, how did this end up under? It's like under his lapel too. It's not like it's not just like stuck on him. So
Busy night?
Never too busy to spend time cutting down your pinatas. Next time, try hanging them a little lower if it isn't too much trouble. Yours, I believe?
So it would seem.
Keep him away, man. He ain't human. Get it away from me!
Jim, I didn't catch these men.
Well, if you didn't, who did?
Batman from that figures out that based on the fact that these guys are saying that Batman was there, that Batman, that a Batarang was left behind, and there was some technology there. And he discusses with Commissioner Gordon at this point that, hey, I didn't do this. And he's immediately suspicious that there may be something else afoot here. In the meantime, we have the duplicate Batman in the Batcave using the Bat computer in a very Google Home or Alexa style way. He's just using all the I mean, you know what? DCAU writers didn't quite get things right with Batman Beyond and how the future would be with laser discs and giant cell phones and all of this stuff. But one thing they did predict was the ability to speak to a computer and it do everything for you.
Totally.
Yeah, that computer is prototype Alexa here. So we sort of get our recap of Heart of Steel, and in case you're a kid watching this on a weekday afternoon after school and hadn't seen those episodes yet, so you get the recap of the duplicates that were made and that they were responsible. That the man responsible was this inventor, Carl Rossum, and so we know the android is headed that way, but before the android arrives, we actually see the real Batman arrive to sort of interrogate Rossum and see what's going on there.
Recognize these? They came from your warehouse. It seems there was another Batman sighted there last night. Could HARDAC have created another duplicate? One of me?
HARDAC's gone. Whatever wasn't blown to bits was confiscated by the police months ago. There's nothing left but junk. Broken toys I outgrew long ago. I don't try to build life anymore, Batman. I just grow it.
I'm sorry. I know how painful it can be to dig up the past.
Then please, leave me alone. Let me get on with my life.
Yeah, so that leads to this little confrontation between the two of them, and it's an interesting scene because we get to see some compassionate Batman in this scene, Jordan, because Batman knows it's Rossum's whole point of creating HARDAC originally was to replace his daughter who had passed away, and Rossum is sort of quietly retired to this farm where he's he has robots helping him out with farming, but it's clearly a very painful moment in this, and Batman at least tries to empathize with him and lets him know he understands how hard digging up the past can be. But I actually really liked that brief little interaction they had there, because you get a lot of Batman being hard nosed, but the times where they show Bruce's humanity and able to relate to people is actually pretty awesome.
Agreed. Yeah, I know. I love that scene. It does it definitely. When you think about the episode as a whole, that the emotional weight of that does kind of keep you going for a while, because after that it does kind of just get into fun fights and stuff. Yeah.
right
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it adds that little bit of layer of emotion there, and it actually, I think it's sort of like a precursor to what we ultimately learn in the climax of the episode of Batman's heart for people and his honest, his genuine care for the people that he interacts with. So after he has this brief shakedown almost of Rossum, and he decides that Rossum has no information on him and leaves him alone, but then suddenly Batman's back there again, and Rossum tries to explain to him he's told everything, but we quickly learn this is in fact not the real Batman.
Yeah, you do get, again, this is an interesting moment of crisis of conscience for the robot, where he's convinced himself that it must be the real Batman's brain in this robot body, and he's sort of pleading with Rossum to tell him that's the case, that he remembers birthdays and his parents and friends and all of this stuff, and Rossum is very kind of matter of fact about it, telling him that no, you remember facts, you remember data, you don't actually have any of these, aren't real emotions or real memories that you have.
Rossum, I need your help.
Where did you come from?
Listen to me. Someone put my mind into this robot body. You're the only one who can help me.
The damage is too extensive. These circuits will give out probably in a matter of hours.
Then we've got to find my real body, or transfer me to another robot shell.
You don't understand. You're not a man's mind in a robot's body. You're a robot, period.
You're lying. It's not possible. I know my family and friends. I remember names, faces, birthdays. I have memories, a past.
You have information, data, nothing more. Do you remember your first kiss? Your favorite song? The last time you tasted a really good steak?
No, but...
Can you remember anything beyond cold, hard facts? Facts can be implanted, accessed from any number of sources. Huh?
Where's HARDAC?
What do you mean? HARDAC was destroyed.
Where is he? Tell me! Now.
It causes something of a breakdown, and as he sort of there's a couple of other times throughout the episode, and we'll certainly probably talk more about this in visuals, but where the robot Batman will sort of see an image that reminds him of the HARDAC symbol, and he sees it on the glass behind him, and it sort of makes him fly into a rage. And then thankfully the real Batman had stuck around, and we get our first fun, like we said, mash your action figures together. Finally had a reason to have like multiple Batman figures, because they're like, they have a jetpack Batman and a regular Batman. It's like, okay, now we can say this is an evil robot. So yeah,
we opportunity too to make a Kenner HARDAC Batman. Absolutely. I would have bought that immediately if that existed. Yeah,
absolutely. I do thank goodness that in DC Direct's dying days, one of the things they did was make a HARDAC Batman.
I don't have that yet. I need to get that. It's so cool.
It's such they did everything great. You have multiple heads, and you got the exposed wires, and he comes with the it's really cool.
Yeah.
So after this brief tussle between Batman, and honestly, this is another foreshadowing to the end of the episode. They're in this greenhouse that begins to collapse because of the fight between the two of them, and the HARDAC Batman actually jumps in to save Rossum and tosses him out of the greenhouse before it collapses. So you kind of get an inkling here that despite whatever the motivation for this HARDAC Batman is going to be, that deep down he does have the same heart as Batman, so to speak, even if it's all wires and electrical, machinery. So at this point, we flash. Batman assumes that this is not the last that we've seen of HARDAC Batman. We discover that he's gone to an impound lot where the police department has the remains of HARDAC. And he happens upon the final piece of HARDAC, and we learn in this moment that HARDAC begins communicating within his brain. We actually get some fun homages we'll talk about in visuals to Terminator in this scene. Also, some great POV shots from inside the robot's head. But HARDAC begins to take over and sort of forces him to install this programming that is ultimately going to turn this single duplicate into the duplicate that then moves forward and recreating HARDAC, and then allowing his plan for replacing all of humanity with duplicate robots. Which, when you say it, it's kind of goofy. But remembering that the heart of it
I love it.
Was that this was basically taking Carl Rossum's pain from losing his daughter, and she was killed in a car crash. So the fact that there would be no more human error, there would be no more destruction, no more all of this stuff. We're removing the human element from the earth. Well, then everything will be in harmony at that point. So at this point, Batman versus Batman 2 takes on. We have an interesting fight scene here in the warehouse.
That's right. So they are sort of at odds, and this time the HARDAC Batman certainly gets the better of it, tosses him out of building into the water. Now, nobody in a DCAU cartoon ever dies from falling into a body of water. We know this time and time again, but
that's true. You can fall as far as you want,
right? You just land in some water, you're fine.
When I first learned that you could falling into water safe, it blew my mind. I said, "What do you mean? Every cartoon I've ever seen, if you just angle yourself in a dive, you'll be fine."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you jump straight out of a plane. It's like you're landing on a pillow.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So it seems, at least for the time being, that the real Batman has been defeated, and once again, HARDAC Batman returns to the Batcave in the Batmobile and inserts this little HARDAC chip into the Bat computer, and sort of this is where we get a lot of exposition dump, where we reiterate HARDAC's plans. He's going to slowly but surely take over the earth, sort of he's going to upload HARDAC to the internet. It's kind of Ultron from the Age of Ultron movie, going to upload himself into the internet, then control all of the nuclear weapons, which will force humans to build the machines he needs to then replace them with robot duplicates.
Master Bruce, I'm so glad you're back.
What became of your evil twin?
It's all taken care of, Alfred. There is only one Batman now.
Oh, good Lord.
I will allow you to continue your necessary maintenance of the Batcave and mansion until your replacement is fully configured. In a few moments, HARDAC will upload into this computer. Through the information network this computer is linked with, HARDAC can imprint himself on every computer on Earth. HARDAC will reactivate, more powerful than ever, and configure more duplicates to replace humanity.
Impossible. A computer can't build a factory.
Humans will construct the necessary machinery.
Humanity will resist.
With total control of worldwide defense and communication systems, HARDAC can be very persuasive.
Yes.
And the rest will be history. So despite Alfred's protest, it looks like things are looking pretty bad.
I love that Alfred comes in with a little bit of logic here too, though. He's like arguing with a robot. Clearly doesn't understand robots. He's like, I just have to reason with him. Well, robots can't build factories. Well, they kind of can, actually. You probably could get robots to build factories.
Probably. So thankfully the real Batman returns here, and
Batman returns.
Yes, that's right.
The movie.
But from there we have a big fight. We also get to like a section of the Batcave we either rarely or maybe had never seen before, which is like the sword display case room of the Batcave, which is next to the lab, I guess.
Yes.
But yes, they continue to have a fight as again Batman keeps trying to reason with the robot and ask him, if by saying this would be free from human error, doesn't that mean it's also free from choice, free from humanity?
And at this point, Batman also begins to suspect that he can sort of exploit the fact that this is a duplicate of him, because he believes that the robot intentionally left him alive because he cannot kill him. And he begins to speculate in the dialogue with him that he's unable to kill, sort of almost taunting him to say, if you're gonna win, you have to be able to kill me. And he sort of appeals to this humanity or the nature of Batman to this duplicate at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best part of this from a narrative perspective, is that HARDAC made his Batman duplicate so good, so perfectly, that it couldn't resist the part. Like, that's so ingrained in the data of who Batman is, like what people know, what the data there is on the Bat computer that they copied to make this duplicate, that the robot can't bring itself to kill because it's supposed to be Batman. And I don't like to get on soapboxes too often about different interpretations of characters, but I just think superheroes in general are supposed to be very aspirational. They're supposed to be making the best possible choices that you or I perhaps would not make in the same situation. So I absolutely adore that they made that Batman's reasoning, and in fact this robot versions of Batman, is made so perfectly that it cannot resist that compulsion that Batman must never take a life. Like, I love that. That's so perfect for Batman.
Where do you land on the Batman killing people, Jordan?
I feel the same way. I mean, I think I do love Michael Keaton's Batman, and that guy that guy kills
about it.
yeah. But I think that for me, this version of Batman is just the real one, and he doesn't do it. And any other version, it's always kind of like, well, I guess it's its own
right
lesser thing.
Yeah. And I mean, to this day, though, I feel like people, regardless of that's the thing that a lot of people have issues with and take umbrage with. It's like, is this a real Batman? This Batman is too gritty. He kills people. Like, that was the big critique on the Batfleck and Batman 89 at times. And it's like, how does Batman separate himself from the bad guys at this point? Like, if he's willing to kill them as well. That's the whole crux of the Dark Knight series too. So yeah, I agree with you. And the fact that he plays into that here, and we have this scene where it looks like that Batman, the real Batman, dies going over the edge of this cliff in the Batcave, and the robot is just so distraught.
taken a life. I've killed a man. My city, my people, what have I done?
It overrides all of what HARDAC had programmed into him at that point, to the point where he comes to the realization that not only did he it looks like he killed somebody, but then he's going to kill all of these additional people in the name of HARDAC. And he decides that he just can't go through with it. So he destroys the Bat computer. It's a huge explosion, killing the HARDAC robot. And we, of course, get the reveal that Batman hung on to some like random pipe that was down there in the
some kind of mining tool, right? Because it has a flashlight on it. So he must have, I guess it's something on the back, the utility belt. Like,
where did that fit? Anyway,
I had thought maybe it could have been from like, that's funny because that's just always what I had assumed, that it was maybe like from excavating the Bat cave. Maybe he knew that there was like, but yeah, I don't know. That's a good point, because it seemed like it had to have been installed there previously to be sticking out of the rock. But yeah, I don't know.
I think in my head, that's like a Mandela effect thing. I always think it's the sword.
Yeah.
Like I always think he like stuck the sword in the wall, but it's not. It's some kind of mining tool that's in the wall there. So
yeah.
Yes, as Batman arrives back to safety with Alfred, they go up and Alfred and Batman sort of again discuss this. And again, it gets to some of that Blade Runner stuff. That's that eternal sci-fi question of, can a synthetic being truly be alive? Could it have a soul? And we get this, we get the name of the episode basically right at the very last line that's spoken in the episode, as Alfred points out that it would have rather destroyed itself than allow a single person, an innocent life, to be taken, and how much that robot then reminded them of the real Batman, and that Batman sort of poses that question of could it have had a soul? And
thank heaven you're alive. It would appear, sir, that it preferred to sacrifice itself rather than allow innocent lives to come to harm. Somewhat like you.
It seems it was more than wires and microchips after all. Could it be it had a soul, Alfred? A soul of silicon, but a soul nonetheless.
And it's like, imagine any other kids cartoon in 1992, like going to that.
You think Life with Louie was posing this question on there? Bobby's World. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that wraps up our little synopsis of the episode. We've talked a lot, so I'm going to throw it over to Jordan. Jordan, give me your overall thoughts. Like, what did you love about this episode? What were the highlights for you? I know we've talked a little bit about some of the things along the way, but just your overall thoughts for the episode.
Oh man, so this growing up was a favorite of mine as a kid, just because it's good Batman versus evil Batman.
Yeah,
you can't really beat that.
Yep.
It also had one of the scariest scenes to me from the show, which was when HARDAC Batman peels his skin back.
Oh yeah,
and he is like, even because I must have been like 4 or 5 or something, but even then I was like, you can see that HARDAC Batman, as he is initially, does not want it. He doesn't want it, and then he's like in pain.
Yep.
That, I would say, that scared me maybe the most of the initial run. And then also another one was the Langstrom Transformation.
Oh yeah,
Man-Bat.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were banned from watching the Man-Bat episode. So.
Oh really? Yeah. It's scary.
The parental unit stepped in on that one and was like, "No, you're not watching that."
It's very scary. So yeah, I always thought that was cool. I love when he, like, seeing HARDAC Batman start to act robotic and precise, and like you can tell that he's stronger and faster and stuff. That part where he a scene that I think about all the time is that part where he jumps up on to look at the window and sees Batman arriving in the Batmobile, and his like he hunches up.
Yes.
And, yeah. Like
it's like demonic. He's got like the red eyes, and it's so good.
It's so cool. It's so cool. So yeah, that's a great visual. I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, that's about it though. Just getting to see Batman fight another Batman, I think is about as cool as it gets when you're a kid watching the show. So
absolutely. Yeah. I agree with you completely. I think this episode is such a, like, we loved that Heart of Steel episode so much. It's one of the few episodes that I've given either of us have given a perfect score to, where we gave it tens across the board. It was so good. So to follow up, and how often is the sequel live up to the very, very, not very often. So the fact that this episode from a story standpoint was able to follow up, to not just repeat the same things that you saw in that first episode, but to keep some of the same elements. There was a lot of horror elements in that original episode. The robots taking over and replacing people, and the visuals matching up with that. And the fact that they were able to keep that same sort of theme throughout for the storytelling here, and tell a really emotional story that also creates more depth at the end of it for the Batman character, because you ultimately, the whole moral of the story here is that Batman's heart is what makes him Batman. Like his desire to do good, and his value of human life, and his willingness to sacrifice his own life at the expense, at the expense of other people, his own life in those cases, to protect others is also a driving core of him. So the fact that you leave the episode with feeling that, like, wow, we're so blessed to watch the real Batman every single week, like fight crime. This is so cool. I think that it just makes this episode so fun. And I felt like I didn't have a choice but to give this a perfect 10 out of 10 for plot.
Oh, nice.
What about you, Jordan? What was your score?
Oh man, that's a very compelling reasoning. I don't know. I would say, I mean, spoiler for this, I'm basically, all of these I'm waffling between a 9 and a 10 for these. I love this episode.
Yeah, it's really good. Go with your gut. That's what we always say. Yeah,
I'll go 10. I'll go 10 also.
All righty,
you got me.
And I'm gonna make it 3 for 3 here with the.
All right.
I think Jordan, you really hit on it there, where it's a great concept for a kid, because like you said, it's Batman versus robot Batman. Cool, like that's awesome. That's super fun. It's easy to understand as like a basic story that if you're 5 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 30, you can get into that part of it for the action, but then to actually take it and make it this sort of deeper character study of who Batman is, and also again sort of pose these fascinating questions about artificial intelligence and when is something truly alive and things like that. On top of that, it's just you can just enjoy it. It's one of those things that rewards you, I think, coming back to it when you're a little bit older and maybe you've experienced a little bit more. So absolutely great 10s from all 3 of us here.
Love it. All right, we'll move on to our second category of the day, which is going to be visuals and animation. Liam, you mentioned at the top we had 2 different animation services here for this episode. Dong Yang did the animation, but the layout services were done by Spectrum. Spectrum, most notably interesting that you mentioned it before, Jordan, but the transformation with Kirk Langstrom, they were responsible for On Leather Wings and some of the amazing visuals from that initial episode. We're gonna let Jordan go first as the we're gonna call you the expert in the room. What stuck out to you? The professional when it comes to artistry. What visuals really stuck out to you? I know you mentioned the one scene with Batman in the window and him kind of hunching up. Was there anything else that stuck out to you that you were just like, man, that's so good?
Okay, let me think. So I love HARDAC Batman punching the computer at the end. Like the force of that is awesome. That last shot of his face when he peels his mask off and you see like this poor Bruce Wayne robot. It's amazing. It's so good.
Yeah.
Then yeah, just like I said earlier, like anytime you could tell clearly that the other Batman is a robot, and he would do these very precise, like weird almost movements. We didn't get anything quite as weird as in the Heart of Steel episodes.
Yes. No,
You
like
kinda-
robot spider.
You kind of want some of that, but I
Yes.
think it's to maybe preserve the integrity of robot Batman, because maybe that's a little too weird.
Yeah.
I
I think there is some. I think the moment in the greenhouse, though, there that sequence where he jumps in to save Ross.
Yeah.
That reminded me very much.
So cool.
He jumps in. He's like very precise, and then when he
Yeah.
throws Rossum out, he just kind of
Yes.
lets his hands hang there for a moment.
Yes.
It's very.
love
It's very
So
like
cool.
intentional, and
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, shoot. I gotta give it. Oh man. Let's see. I'll give it a 10 as well.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it.
The only other thing I wanted to ask you about specifically, Jordan, is now depending on the episode, who was directing, who was animating, there was a little variation in the Batman model. So this
Yes.
is like the longer, swooped back ear, droopy nose Batman.
Right.
Does that take you out of it at all, or are you pretty much just like you look at that as like it's a different artist drawing the comic type?
Yeah, because I heard you guys talk about that too on one of your other episodes. I totally get what you're saying. I think I have an affinity. Like, it's cool to see the evolution of his model throughout the show. I do like later on when they kind of pare it down too, and it actually is closer to what you can tell Bruce Timm wanted the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
But I think like I don't know, something about it, like that specific model. I do agree that like, yeah, his nose is so droopy. But something about it, like, it just makes you think of the earliest episodes, and I have kind of a love for it in that way. So yeah, it's like its own flavor, I guess, to me.
Yeah. We always say it's like as long as it's consistent throughout the episode, like, you know, when you get into it, it's like, all right, this is a droopy nose Batman episode. All right, that's fine. You know, we know what he's going to look like throughout the entire episode. It's fine as long as that's consistent across the board. Because actually, I think in Mask of the Phantasm, there are some storyboarding scenes where they did the more squared off Batman, and then there are other scenes that have the longer eared droop nose. So to me, that movie is perfect, but when you look at it, it's like could take you out of it or be distracted.
Right.
It's like he looks a little bit different than he did like 2 minutes ago. What happened?
It's especially, man, for that real quick. I love that. I just watched it again recently, like last week. And yeah, it is. I would say, yeah, it is perfect. But I just want a TMS version of that whole movie
For sure. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, if they could just, I don't know. It's
like
it's beautiful for
special edition version, like that.
Yeah,
exactly. With some reanimated stuff there, that would be make it even better. But yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned some of the earlier episodes, because I thought that scene at the beginning where the thugs are in the warehouse, it's so dark, like palette wise, it's shadows on shadows. And you think about those really early episodes like On Leather Wings or Nothing to Fear, where you can really tell it's the black paper backgrounds and stuff like that. And it's just barely illuminated, you know, by the flashlights. You just kind of see a little bit of their faces in those scenes. Right. And when Batman kind of bursts out and there's lightning striking and you just kind of have that flashlight kind of bluish light on him, I was like, that also, I think, really took me back to some of those really early episodes of the series.
That's totally stuff I should have mentioned too just now. Like, that whole intro is so moody, so cool. And then cutting to like the rainy Wayne Manor to indicate that everything is going very wrong very fast is so cool. Yeah.
What a storytelling device, right? It adds and it just adds something in those scenes to me, that horror thread that's throughout that opening bit there. It's just like the flashes of lightning on their faces, on the villains' faces, on Batman's face, on Alfred's face. It just adds to that drama. And we'll talk about music next, but the music working with that is just it's just so great. It's mix of it all is great. I do think that we mentioned it briefly, but there were some homages to a couple of different famous movie franchises. So we get some POV shots inside HARDAC's brain as he's sort of, as HARDAC Batman's brain, as he's trying to resist. And I did make those same notes, Jordan. That scene is so terrifying because he's like holding his, trying to hold his hand back, and it's like shaking. It
feels very violating. Like
it
feels like,
does.
I don't like that. Like,
he's like trying to prevent HARDAC from installing this thing into his brain. And like you said, coupled with like he's screaming and he's like uncomfortable. It's but it's done so well that that visual is so disturbing. And there's one really up close scene that they do of HARDAC's wires as I think that his first introduction to Rossum, where you look at it and it looked like almost like a comic book panel because of the way that they shaded around the wires and stuff. Did you notice that?
Yes.
It's like super hyper detailed around the costume, and there's like a lot of like crosshatch work there. Very cool. Reminded me a lot of like a Fleischer Superman or something that you would see something hyper detailed on in one specific scene and then cut to the next, and it's not
right
animation. But I love that. I think this episode is such a, as I like to say, a visual smorgasbord. There was one thing that took me out of it. I will say this, and I have to point these out here or there because I always go back to Heart of Ice is the perfect episode of Batman the Animated Series, but my visuals were 9 out of 10 because they reversed the bat symbol in one scene. So I always go back to that. If there's one thing wrong, I have to take a point off for it.
Okay.
And I didn't know whether or not who to throw this blame on. We don't do like sound design or something like that, but there's one scene after he loads the computer in where his mouth is moving, and then afterwards the dialogue comes in and his mouth stops. And it's Batman talking. It's not HARDAC. So it just doesn't match up quite
That's
right.
True.
I was just like, stickler. I know. I'm a stickler when it comes to this stuff. For those reasons, I ended up giving it a 9 out of 10. Liam, what about?
All right. Well, I'm on Team Jordan for this one. I also gave it a 10.
All right.
But yeah, a 9 is hardly nothing to sneeze at either. So
no, totally.
Another bunch of great scores from all three of us.
You pointed out the reference also to to Indiana Jones.
Oh,
I
yes.
think
There's one shot where they're loading like the HARDAC box. I think when they're doing like the recap when HARDAC is telling Batman robot about its origins, and there's just a shot of like a warehouse and someone wheeling the box in, and then it's sort of slowly panning out like it's like at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I was like, yeah, there's a fun little homage there that.
The coloration also in the computer scene too. Last thing I'll say about that, I thought that as the computer begins to count down and it's kind of flashing red, you got the flashing on all of the characters' faces, and it kind of blinks intermittently, and that's such a like a nice little touch there that wasn't necessary, but they decided that the computer was going to blink with this, and then they were going to show it on the characters' faces, kind of reflecting off of it. Just that attention to detail.
And my last note is I like Robot Batman's little finger laser. Just so random because we don't get like laser guns very often in this series. Like it's not the 1930s all the time, and you have like revolvers and like like the shotguns are real old school and everything, and all of a sudden this guy just has a laser cannon on his finger. I was like, yeah, that's cool though.
But he shoots like a stormtrooper. That's the problem. He's like shooting the stuff in front of Batman, 10 feet away from him, and he's just like, that's how Batman knew he wasn't going to kill him.
Right. That's part of that story.
There we go. All right, moving on to our next category. It is going to be music. We actually have, I think right off the bat, we have some just tremendous musical pieces here. The thing that I notated was as we get the title card come up, a great title card, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
The Shadow of Batman and the
one of my faves.
Oh, so good. Just instantly memorable. Like when you think of this episode, there's certain episodes that you like, that title card is just drilled into your brain, and this is one with that metal hand reaching out towards Batman. But the music comes in, and if you notice, and if you compare it to the original HARDAC theme, what they did, the composer took the original HARDAC theme and married it to, it's like the original mashup, it's like for mashup thing. Mashed up the HARDAC theme with the Batman theme, and I was like, oh, this is going to be good. This is going to be so good. And it really continued throughout. Everything, I think that initial scene, we talked about it. We listened to these, we have the soundtracks downloaded, and Liam and I were checking out before we got on the air here, Jordan. We were listening to these pieces in isolation, and the track with while they're in the warehouse, and then with Alfred, there's some Twilight Zone type
real eerie
real eerie horror movie like
cool
soundtrack sounding stuff,
shrill strings and that really and again you can kind of envision that reveal, like when you see the circuitry for the first time and you get that really sharp it just perfectly really added to the emotion of whatever they wanted you to feel. It just really married itself to the visuals really well.
Absolutely. Yeah. What notes, if you had, I know you're a visual guy, but I'm sure you appreciate music too, Jordan. Did you have anything?
It's tough for me because this music for the whole series is amazing. It's one of the biggest selling points of this show, I think.
Absolutely.
So like you said, I love the mashing up of HARDAC and Batman's themes. I love all of the somber and weird versions of the Batman song that keeps playing. It's a lot of that the whole time, but it's always so cool. It's always such a cool reveal or moment where it just gets underscored by this dark version of that song. So I don't know. I gotta. It's pretty awesome.
It is. It really is.
I gotta give it a 10 as well.
There we go. Yeah, I also went a 10 out of 10. And I'll just mention, so the music was done by Harvey Cohen and Carl Johnson under Shirley Walker's supervision. Shirley Walker, of course, just the greatest.
A legend.
A legend. Yeah. Missed, but she, the pieces, the fact that they took these and again, you have homages back to the original HARDAC episode. You have the Batman theme very present, and it punctuates the episodes and creates the emotion at times. I think the climax of the episode, as the HARDAC Batman realizes the weight of what he's done, and he goes to that computer, and he's just standing. It's the visuals. He's standing there. He's looking up at the computer. Kevin Conroy, we'll talk about next, is given a performance, and the music just sort of swells as he just brings his hands down and destroys the computer. It's just, what a great way to punctuate that scene. So good.
Yeah, that to me is, I think, as Jordan already mentioned, just the different ways they were able to fit the Batman theme, and depending on which Batman we were following, it would be played. Would be played a little more ominous. Like when he steps out of the Batmobile and it's the robot Batman, and Alfred is all horrified. You get like almost this is what it would sound like if Batman was one of the villains on his own show.
Totally, good point.
So it's a really, really clever piece to use the main theme as a refrain, but to convey different emotions throughout the episode. So along with the two of you, I also gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. We are 3 for 3 here.
There we go.
It's already looking like it's going to be a pretty big high score from all three of us here, but
there we go.
We got one more category to go here, Cal.
That's right. So we have our voice actors that we're going to talk about here. Not a huge cast, because we have one guy playing 2 roles.
I hope he got paid twice.
Yes, he's really, honestly. And he deserved a truckload of money, I think, for his performance. But let's review our voice cast, and we'll go through and talk about what we thought of everybody's performances.
Absolutely. So just briefly, we do, of course, have Bob Hastings as Commissioner Gordon.
Great.
Again, he just gets the one scene, but it's fun to have him bouncing off of Kevin Conroy, of course. We do have William Sanderson returning as Carl Rossum, which we should mention. Mr. Sanderson actually was in the original Blade Runner movie, which I'm sure not an accident. A lot of times when,
Right.
when Andrea Romano, the voice and casting director, would bring somebody like that in, it was generally not a coincidence that when someone like that would be on,
Right.
would end up voicing somebody here. So it's again, and I think he's probably the first name to talk about other than Kevin Conroy in this episode, because in that scene that we've talked about a little bit already, but where the robot Batman is pleading with him that, you know, I have to get my brain into a new robot, or we have to find my real body, and Rossum is just sort of matter-of-factly breaking him down and just telling him, no, you're not real, and like how that devastates him. I think he's tremendous in that scene when he's asking him, like, what do you actually remember?
Yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, he's awesome. I think we were talking about earlier, that scene with him is like one of the standout parts of the episode emotionally. I like thinking back about all Rossum's appearances. I think this is the one I think of the most, just because of that scene. There's so much going on with his character. He's already gone through the traumatic events of his first appearance, and he's kind of grappling with all this stuff. He's in the middle of trying to rebuild his life, and you get that across in his voice.
Yeah, not only did he lost his daughter, now he's lost his entire business, essentially. You have to think that he was probably a pariah in the city for causing all this destruction. He's not, the police aren't any fans of him. He probably doesn't feel Batman's much of a fan of him. And he's just there like picking corn now. Like that's what he does. So it's sort of this sad, isolated life that he's there with, and like the poetry of him there with his robots that are now reduced to just kind of helping him, you know, pick vegetables. So yeah, the fact that he's able to that initial conversation with Batman where he's so sorrowful and just, please leave me alone. I just want to be alone. And like it's his vocal performance communicates that. And then that whole back and forth with the HARDAC Batman of, all right, well, if you're real, then tell me all of these things. It's one of those interactions that I hadn't seen this episode probably in, I don't know, 5 years or something like that. But that interaction, it's everything, the music, the visuals, and that back and forth with them. Tell me, you know, do you remember your first kiss? Do you remember how the last time you had a really good steak? Like, just great.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Great. Big ups to Mr. Sanderson there. And then elsewhere in our cast, we do have Jeff Glenn Bennett returning as HARDAC. He's done a million voices over the years, including Johnny Bravo, which is always the one I like to point out.
I didn't know that.
Memory error detected. Reconfiguring mnemonic files.
What are you doing to me?
A learning program designed to complete your memory files and help you better fulfill your operating directives. Shortly before self-destruction, HARDAC created one final duplicate, an advanced prototype with personal and technical information accessed from Batman's computer. You were that duplicate. But your memory systems were damaged before full activation occurred. The new circuit board contains HARDAC's core operational systems and memory. All duplicates were programmed to seek out this component in the event of HARDAC's destruction. Your memory systems have now been reconfigured.
Yes. I am fully operational now.
Excellent. You now house my command files. We are HARDAC. We will reactivate the plan to replace all humanity with duplicates.
Because I was 7 years old in year 2000 when that show was on Cartoon Network. So that's always the one.
Quite the range there. Evil supercomputer and Johnny Bravo.
It's so obvious now that you say that, but I never put that together.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those things where once you know that's him, you'll hear him and like, oh yeah, that's him too. Like he's one of those guys that pops up in almost every video game and animated thing at some point. But yes, we have him as HARDAC, and we also have interestingly, we mentioned Richard Mall, who of course more famously voices Two-Face in this series. but is also the voice of the Bat computer. That's maybe my one, this is really a minor nitpick, but like I wish we would have gotten the Bat computer and HARDAC interacting for a second.
Good point.
Kind of like, yeah, I already mentioned Age of Ultron, but that might be my favorite scene in that movie is when Ultron is attacking Jarvis in like cyberspace.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to see like the Bat computer reacting to HARDAC taking it over or something like that for a moment. But
you guys brought up Alexa earlier. I wish I could give Alexa Richard Moll's voice.
Yes. Oh man, that's a license to print money right there.
Yeah.
Take all of my money, Richard Mall.
Oh man, that's
So
incredible.
good.
I love that idea.
I know. Yeah.
Yes, as our top two actors, of course, we do have Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. as Alfred, who, as we've already talked about, is quite exasperated and completely out of his depth from pretty much moment one in this episode.
Yeah, he really is, but him being sort of the foil to this robot Batman. I love when when the robot Batman comes back and he thinks that it's Bruce, and then when he has the realization, because HARDAC Batman is like talking like a robot, that it's not him, that he just has this sort of like incredulous, my goodness, like he really realizes that he thinks Bruce is dead at that point.
Right.
Yeah, there's even like, I don't know, maybe this is too far of a string to try to connect here, but I'm going to do it anyway. It almost kind of in a weird way mirrors the scene in Phantasm where he puts the cowl on for the first time. And Alfred has this like visceral, horrified reaction to seeing him in the bat suit for the first time. And you almost feel like it's whether that's, I think that's probably just my brain making that connection, but I love that as like sort of a parallel scene to
yeah, I could see that. I think like just because I feel like more so in this version than others, you really feel like the fatherly connection between Bruce and Alfred, and for Alfred to see this perversion of his son is very hard for him. I don't know, so I think, and that's kind of what that first scene would have been to him in Phantasm, right? Is like seeing what has to become to complete his mission, but then now you're seeing this even further. The thing that he's always afraid of Bruce becoming, basically, this heartless version of Batman. Yeah,
absolutely.
So good.
I love that. But yeah, that brings us, of course, to the main event here for our voice acting category, which is pulling double duty. We have Kevin Conroy, of course, as Batman himself and as the robot HARDAC Batman. And what's fun about this, I think, Jordan, is that even throughout the episode, like HARDAC Batman is like three different characters almost. Because first he's regular he thinks he's the regular Batman, and then he's sort of this panicked, sort of frantic, trying to figure out what's going on. And then once HARDAC has taken over, he starts to speak more robotically and everything. So it's kind of wild. And then of course he's playing the real Batman on the other side of it as well, having to talk to himself. So what a week of work must have been put into this episode by Kevin Conroy.
Right. Yeah, and you even get like when he's kind of panicked, he sounds more like Bruce. So you get because I was like, oh, Bruce isn't really in this episode, but you do hear that version of him when he takes his cowl off and talks like that for a while until he becomes HARDAC Batman fully. So yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah, I hadn't really connected that, but that's a really nice other wrinkle to it. And then as we've already talked about, the final bits there when they're arguing sort of over the philosophy of replacing humans with robots and all of that, and they even kind of add like once his face is damaged with the chemicals, you even get like a more robotic filter put onto the voice, and it all kind of comes to a head, I think, in that moment where he looks at as we've already talked about a couple times, when he looks at the countdown of the computer and he says, "My city, my people," and then he gives this giant yell, like this, like,
what have I done?
Outpouring, and then slams his fists down. It's like, gosh, I got tired just like listening to how much effort Kevin Conroy is putting in this episode. Like, talk about putting in the work, man.
The line that got me is right after he's in that climax of the episode and their final battle. As they start fighting, he gives he's giving this soliloquy about himself. He says, "HARDAC is reborn in the very image of the man that destroyed him." Like, how poetic! Like, and the way that he's delivering it is in that sort of emotionless state that he's taken on since he's added HARDAC to his sensory whatever his hard drive or whatever. So
you cannot prevent the inevitable, Batman. HARDAC is reborn. In the very image of the man who destroyed him. I know all your moves, Batman. So why don't you finish me off? Or have you become enough like me to know that I won't take a life?
It's so good. We could talk for days on how great Kevin Conroy is as Batman. But the fact, we've also talked about this in past episodes, where if you have a person that has to pull double duty and play two of the same character, or like, I can't imagine as a voice actor how difficult that must be, because a lot of times you do have to differentiate between the two, or you're asked to do something to differentiate. And it just felt so easy, in my opinion, listening to the way Kevin Conroy
totally
did it, right? You could probably see this coming a mile away, but based solely, I think, on Kevin Conroy's performance alone, I think that I had no choice. I had to give this a 10 out of 10.
Wow, love it. What about you, Jordan?
Also 10 for everything you were saying, for Kevin, for Carl Rossum. And it's like everything great. Love it.
So good.
Absolutely. And not surprisingly, I also gave it a 10 out of 10.
Nice. I love it.
So yeah, this is already in rarefied air as we approach our final scores. But yeah, I think this is really just one of those ones when Cal and I started this show, you're like, oh, I can't wait till we get to talk about this one, right?
Yes.
Like, this is worth sitting through the Underdwellers and some of these like really not so great Superman. We just reviewed Superman's Pal recently.
Oh, sure, yeah.
All-time terrible episode. And sometimes those can be fun too, because you get to pick on stuff maybe a little bit more than you would in a normal week. But just you wanted to talk about the stuff you really love, and I'm so glad we had Jordan on to talk about it with us this week, because the three of us, yes, our scores are very similar, but I think we all kind of picked out different things that made it that great episode for us.
Absolutely. Well, and if you've listened to the podcast before, we rarely disagree on anything.
Right. We have HARDAC's voice to let us know if there is.
We have a disagreement alarm if there happens to be something we disagree on. So, all right. Well, that will bring us to tallying our final scores. Oh, before we get there, let me not forget. I have a bonus point for this episode. And it's really just more love for Kevin Conroy. I think we've talked about it for the past 5 minutes, so I won't go on for forever, but just the difficulty that it takes to do different performances all within an episode, and to come across authentically, and to somehow, through being an motionless robot, communicate emotion and go through various different performances throughout. It just speaks to his ability to be able to voice act, for his acting chops to come through. This is like the perfect showcase. If somebody was like, hey, what's the best Kevin Conroy episode? This would probably be top 3, if not top 2.
I was going to say, well, honestly, it's funny. We've already kind of mentioned a couple of parallels, but when they're arguing about humanity and taking away choice and stuff, ironically, it reminds me of another episode where he's talking to himself, that being the Justice League episode, A Better World.
Yes.
I talked a little bit about Justice Lords with Jordan earlier, but they have a very similar conversation in that episode about how the order will, remove the chaos, people will be safe, but you're also taking away their humanity in the process. And that's a long-term story, not exclusive to Batman, but the idea of, freedom at what, is freedom more important than safety, and is the chaos and randomness of the world, is bringing order to it worth it if you're also sacrificing, what makes, all of us individuals and things like that. So I think it's really kind of fun to see that parallel as well. As this is definitely a top tier Kevin Conroy performance.
Love it. All right. Well, I think it's time to total things up. I think with our scores here. Well, Jordan, you had 10s across the board.
Yeah, pretty easy. Yeah.
Pretty easy. 40 out of 40.
Even I can do that math.
Yeah, that math's pretty 40 out of 40. Liam, what about you?
I also had perfect scores across the bay. So that means it's another 40 out of 40.
And this is a historical moment. First time ever on the podcast, 3 40s.
That's right.
Because with my bonus point, it also totals up to a 40.
Oh my gosh.
So,
we had to do it for all the 5-year-old version of all of us who just wants to see Batman fight robot Batman.
Right? just mashing our action figures together in the Batcave. Batman. So good. Well, Jordan, the last thing that we do before we go, before we'll say goodbye to you and let you plug your socials and all that stuff, is we also then started talking about rewatchability when it comes to these episodes. So there are certain episodes that you're like, if somebody sat down and said, all right, show me the best 3 episodes or best 5 episodes, would you even consider this episode for that? There are some where you're like, absolutely not, we're skipping over this.
Right.
We also consider like the main play in the DCAU. Does it, long term, is there threads that are followed up on this episode, or is that's also something that you consider through that. So we usually give like 2 thumbs up, 1 thumb up. Like, where does this land for you as far as rewatchability if somebody's asking you about his Silicon Soul?
I mean, for me, rewatching, I will rewatch this whenever. I love this episode.
Yeah.
I think also, though, it speaks to just the series as a whole, where it probably wouldn't be in my top ones to recommend to someone initially, just because there's so many good ones. But it would be definitely one I would consider. Like, after you get like the first 4 or 5 big ones out of the way, be like, okay, now let's watch.
Right.
Yeah, Heart of Steel and his Silicon Soul. Yeah. Even like just watching Heart of Steel alone, I remember as a kid, that one felt almost like movie level to me.
Yes.
Absolutely. So then to have this follow up too, I don't know. It's tough for me. Look, I love this show. I got to give it 2 thumbs up.
Right. I agree with you. I think everything. I think even though there's not plot threads, this is the end of the HARDAC story for pretty much for the for the series. We don't get you get Carl Rossum making another appearance later on, but we don't get any HARDAC follow up. But because it's a follow up to another previous episode that's a very important part of the series. There's a lot of stuff in those initial episodes with Barbara Gordon's story that play out in her ultimate arc as turning into Batgirl, and so there's a lot in that initial episode. For this to be a perfect follow up to that, and it truly adds depth, I think, to the Batman character. You understand, leaving this episode, you understand who the Batman, the animated series, the DCAU Batman is better than before you watched it. So I think,
totally.
Yeah, agreed. For all the reasons both of you already mentioned, I think it's definitely a must watch for this series. Whether you're watching it for the first time or rewatching, you gotta come back to it as well, I think.
Totally.
Absolutely. All right. Well, as I mentioned, Jordan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yes.
It was an honor.
Thank you guys.
This is so easy to come in here and talk Batman. We're happy to have you back whenever you're free or whenever you want to. You are welcome back to be our special correspondent. If you don't mind, let the good people at home know, if you have any upcoming projects you can talk about. Because I know in the comic book industry, sometimes you got to keep things on the DL. If you have anything you want to plug there, please do. And if at least plug your social media so people can go see some awesome artwork.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm at Gibson and GoGo at Twitter and Instagram. That's kind of where I post the most. There is stuff coming up, but I can't talk about it.
That's all right.
Just stay tuned, and you guys might be pretty excited. That's all. That's all I can say.
We like hearing that, and our imaginations run wild. But thank you so much for coming on the program today. We look forward to hearing and seeing what's coming up from you. Hopefully, we're going to cross our fingers it's DCAU related, and hopefully we'll have you on again in the future because you get it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah.
Wow, Liam, that was so much fun. Man, having Jordan on, somebody that's just like us, that clearly has such a deep love for not only the DCAU, but certainly Batman, the animated series, and just being able to nerd out and geek out with them was just such a fun opportunity for us.
Absolutely, Cal. That was, as you said, just so much fun getting to talk to somebody that knows and loves this world the same way that we do. And as always, same thing when we had a friend of the show, Monica Cabina, best friend of the show, on. Listening to someone who's this is their job to work with these characters and can hear their more their professional analysis of these shows is really, really cool. And I always feel like not only is it great to talk with them, very easy to talk with them, but you also feel like you learned a little bit, and you can kind of take that learning with you as we go forward, reviewing next week's episode and every episode that comes after that.
That is right. Well, Liam, since we kind of did this backwards, we started with our Elseworlds tale at the beginning of the month. We will not be wrapping up this month with an Elseworlds. Nope, we'll be wrapping up this month with the next episode of Batman, the animated series. Very excited to cover that with you next week.
That's right. It'll be another memorable one on the docket for us. Maybe not quite as memorable as the last 2 weeks. It's hard to top Demon's Quest and now his Silicon Soul, but we do have the very memorable Fire from Olympus coming next week. The introduction, of course, of Maxi Zeus into the animated DCAU world. So another very memorable one with, I think, some pretty memorable moments and voice performances. So can't wait to get into that one on the show next week.
Bound to be a blast. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the very next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.